Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today is December 17, 2025. I want to thank Rob Grant. His amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Also want to thank Will Erickson for introducing me to today's guest, M. Woods. Where are you calling from, M?
Calling from cold, bitter cold Chicago.
How cool is that? Before we jump into the first question, I wanted to make a correction in part one, which we did August 24th of 2024. I was trying to name the guy who invented TV in America, and I kept saying Wordsworth, and it's Farnsworth. and he was actually looking at the wheat, and the little wheat stalks was what he found, which is called electronic pointillism. And it's like the dots that put together. So it was when we were talking about effects precede causes, but it's funny because I don't put comments ever in anything, and I should have just typed it in. I was referring to blah, blah, blah. But we covered a lot in part one, and it really was inspiring. One of the best I've ever had in my 40 years interviewing people, over 1,000 people. And the first thing I wanted to go into for a second is something that you talked about, and it was physical reality versus human reality. And what is the difference, basically, if you can suss that out?
So I was thinking about this. In many ways, I think before when we spoke, I would have probably made note of Sartre's idea of facticity in being in nothingness. And facticity, I understand to be that being that is uninterrupted or unbroken by that of human reality, which interjects with nothingness. And so that facticity is kind of taken as a given by several philosophers, Heidegger, for instance. However, stewing over it even more, the problem is, of course, our entrance into understanding anything about this facticity still is filtered through the percepts of the human. And the considerable finitude of our body, and also I'd say the considerable finite arrangements of our actions and movements, lead me further to maybe even a more cynical approach to say that facticity is so far removed, and there's such a dissonance or a dissociation that occurs between our body pushing up against that tactile field, that what we know of it is really consolidated into such a small set of funnels, that we can only say it's the I've been reading McLuhan a little bit recently too, but in the introduction to the laws of media, he's talking about how that tactile nature of the sense gives way eventually from one to resistance to also to a point where one is then unable to perceive whether or not the other is touching it, or if you or the subject is touching the other. And so I'm confounded more and more in seeing reality, because reality is funneled through this limited physical body with its limited arrangements, as to how I can even necessarily find ground for the empirical other than in the suffering of other people.
Yeah.
And so more and more, especially as we continue to turn in this Epstein saga and the crazy arrangement of the signs and in the TVs, the funny thing is that the media has almost become obsolete by its fragmentation.
Yeah.
And in many ways, in its loss of meaning, has further fragmented American reality within our sphere, to the point of this numb disengagement. Because we've also seen how even physical activism has no effect, and so I'm further, I'd say, maybe more cynical now than speaking before. Not in a bad way, but just like what I mean is observing the
Yeah.
map of reality, as it were, to say that that idea that Baudrillard has of this constant spinning, the Mobius strip of negative spiraling, as Baudrillard calls it, is more and more true to me. You
Yeah.
know, it really requires extreme strategy, and Baudrillard even says in Fatal Strategies, at the end of Fatal Strategies, "Have I even presented to you a strategy? No." It's like there is none, right? If there's a causality, we were talking about this sort of fatal being, um, then in many ways there's not a strategy against that.
Yeah. That's amazing, because when you said the word tactility, and I'm really impressed you dove into Laws of Media. We read that whole book as a group out loud. So we read Finnegan's Wake out loud with a group of people, and then my friend goes, "Why don't we read McLuhan out loud with a group of people?" And that's the book we started with. And
That's a tough one.
it's a tough one, but it's good that you chose that one. The other one you should delve into that's unbelievable is Take Today, the Executive as Dropout. So in 1972, the hippies were dropping out. I was dropping out, but he said, Take Today, the Executive as Dropout. And it's an unreadable book, but it's still fun to have on your shelf and glance at once in a while. But he talks about the resonating interval, that tactility isn't your hand touching your hand, it's the space between.
That's
And
it.
so
Yeah.
that's like, pixel vision being 2,000 dots, and television, metaphorically, is 200,000 dots. So it's like, how many dots do we need? Because the reality, distinguishing between physical reality and human reality, in your reference in part one was amazing, because I had just read two lines in some artsy fartsy magazine, and they quoted Cronenberg's Videodrome, which is a movie made by the Canadian filmmaker, and he puts a character in it, and it's based on McLuhan because he studied with McLuhan.
Yep.
And the character
Brian
says,
Oblivion.
yeah, Brian Oblivion, he says, and I wanted you to just play off the human reality and physical reality to these two lines. One was Videodrome, TV is reality, and reality is less than TV. And then they said after that, well, there's even a better line from Family Guy, which I've never seen, but it's a TV show. Reality is what we do together. So which, is that more physical reality or human reality? And is that an applicable thing? Would you say reality is what we do together?
But okay, this is really interesting. So, right in Proteus, it's Proteus Unbound, or Proteus Bound. In the beginning of Laws of Media, for instance, um, uh, the idea of the Greek alphabet is what McLuhan presents, right? And the
Yeah.
flattening of space, the creation of the figure that's figure only, um, with the alphabetical symbol, let's say. And I'll say there, I do have some grounds by which to question the some of the things that McLuhan proposes in the beginning of that book, um, but because it's very centered on the Greeks, and it doesn't take into account some of the things that we now know, like in a
Yeah.
Gobekli Tepe, for instance, that we have signed seals that appear, and maybe in fact the systems of language and written language actually go back 10,000 years, and they've just been destroyed because human beings destroy. One principle of the way human beings react with that ficticity is that what they build, they destroy.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Sure.
Or what they build is easily destroyed. And destruction is only viewed from that perspective, from that position of human reality. So it is shared, right? In that sense, right? The thing that we share all is the breaking of the ground from the unbroken, undescribed, um, let's say, the confounding of that to the symbolic sense, which already is applied when we inhabit space, whether it be the auditory space or the visual space. We have broken up that ground even without ascertaining a figure yet. But that is the way that we are oriented. Um, I also say though, in terms of the media though, and uh, in the same way, the McLuhan is arguing that the auditory space that preceded the symbolic replacement into the alphabet, that was the prevailing form of consciousness, let's say, or percept of reality, and then that from that point forward, this almost abstract, fake, perfect form was created out of that alphabetic flattening and out of Euclidean space. um, then maybe we could say that we are past that non-Euclidean revolution, this past that time space revolution back and into the confounding um, place in which we are seeing the extents to which our mathematical systems, our physical, our ability to ascertain the singularity of a black hole, for instance, we see the limitations actually in our ability to measure the universe or to even understand the rate at which it's expanding or escalating. If anything, we've entered back into a logarithmic scale that is further confounding us every day. And then that is confounded by the sort of fascist non-reality that we see plugged in to the media. At the same time that we have invested in AI, which is confounding us in how well it works actually, considering this large language or large learning models weren't necessarily expected to perform the way that they have been, and essentially have reconfigured a form of consciousness that is held up by this large, both hardware, both physical and software apparatus that I call the digital sickness, but that's just kind of like a funny mythological term to give it. This siphonophoric instrument that holds up our systems of economy and our reality, as it were. It has a hard exterior. It's an organism that we have resurrected in the form of all of like the sort of internal meddlings of human consciousness, but given exteriority. And that is now, I would say, imprinting upon us how to make it, how the instructions upon which we are to construct it are inherently tied to our economic advancement and therefore are inherently tied to our survivalism. And so by fate alone, we have gone from 2001: A Space Odyssey to its creation and plotted the path almost diabolically. In fact, it is diabolical because they are directly referencing it. And we know that there are nihilists at the head of it, like Peter Thiel, for instance, who directly are referencing the points that we're saying. It's very much like L. Ron Hubbard, right? The diabolical figures exist within history. And yet we try to maintain a sense of sanity by almost discounting them. So this is the meddling of the sort of fascist politics. But beyond that, what I would argue is that VR and AI together propose a real blurring, and that which no longer has the distinctions of, let's say, the surface of a media, but is the medio ambiente, like the environment itself.
Yeah.
And environment is the media of the artist right now. But the problem is the, and this is maybe the end of this point. What I see in Chicago is that media, what I'm talking about is that the language has become so incoherent. People are breaking apart from the media itself, that the reality that they actually choose to conjure up is a living reality. It's a factual reality, which is to say that there are teenagers, for instance, that are meeting up in downtown Chicago and going and causing mischief and shooting each other. And, they, from this kind of bizarre cocoon that's been created, is a violent rupture in a living space. And
Yeah.
that's its ultimate manifestation still.
Wow. Really covered a lot there, and I appreciate how articulate and concise you are. And you inspire me because, first of all, when you brought up 2001, it always gets me because when they asked Stanley, why'd you make 2001? He says to convolute McLuhan. That's in the Playboy interview. Like, he really admits, this is why I made this film. And so in 1939, we saw a television telephone, the format that we're on right now. It's called television telephone. That's what we're on. Live TV across the world, television telephone. And then 39, it comes out, the year Finnegan's Wake comes out at the New York World's Fair. And then it really becomes a reality in 2001 when the guy calls his daughter from the spaceship and wishes her a happy birthday. Now it's all we do. There's a comic on the Venice boardwalk, and he's cutting people down as they walk by, and he looks at kids and he goes, "Quick, you're gonna miss your Zoom." And so then you brought up this word ground. So I asked Eric McLuhan if he could summarize his philosophy, his life, in one word after the word the. So it's like Kubrick's is The Shining, Joyce's The Wake, and Eric said The Playground. And I said, whoa, because that's ground, figure ground, and play. And I goes, well, what would your dad say? And he goes, same thing, The Playground.
That's
And
awesome.
so then, most people, what you touched on too was how everybody gets the medium is massage, the medium is message wrong, but that's okay. They get it a little. And Marshall's a content guy. He's a literary guy. So he says, oh, the form is more important than the content. Well, he really wasn't saying that. He was exaggerating it to make his point. So I always tell people, because he did it to these TV guys, and they go, what do you mean? We spend time and we want our content to be important. Like me and you, we're filling 2 hours of content here. We're serious. And I asked my niece once, she was watching the stupidest TV show you could imagine. And I just said to her, why are you watching this? And she said, because nothing else is on. That sounds stupid and airheady, but it isn't, because the environment of TV could be you sitting in your couch and you're just zoning out, and it doesn't matter what's on. It's right. You said the environment.
So it that would be that live aspect of television programming had the communal aspect that was the nostalgic 90s version of what is actually missing from the now digital library archive. It is not the fact that it is curated, it's the fact that other people you knew were tuning in at the same time as you, and you had kind of like this inherent and implicit feeling of being a part of a thing that was communal, despite the fact that all communal things have been broken apart fully.
But that's exactly why I counter. This is live. You know why I do my podcast live? Because it's easier to put them on YouTube. There's no extra button pushing. As
Yeah,
soon as it's done, it automatically goes over. So
that's what we used to do.
I hate to hit any buttons or have my people who help me hit any buttons. I go, I want to do this the easiest possible way, but I don't. And people go, well, can people tune in while we're doing it? I goes, yeah, but just have them watch it when we're done, because I don't want the chat to distract us. That's why. And there's a guy who dropped two lines in already, but I don't try to. I don't try to read them. I don't want to address them, but it's all right. I like when, I go to this one McLuhan thing, and it's all the great McLuhanites, Arthur Croker, and everybody's speaking, and it's 8 hours, and the chat's more fun than the big hotshot speakers, So I love that communal when it's happening, and that was the big one, was OJ's chase. OJ's chase, we were all there live. Whoa.
That's it. Yes.
It does happen. It does happen on YouTube. There's a car chase, and radio, they still have, there's a car chase in LA, and they're like, oh, he's turning down this side. Oh, yeah,
And LA will break up I'm sad. I will, when I'm in my mood and I want to do work and have just something chatter in the background, I'll put on an LA car chase. Just have that in the background. I got influenced by James Benning on that too.
James Benning told you that?
And the accidents, the highway accidents.
Yeah.
Benning would have, he had this one movie that he was showing, these unedited YouTube archival things of just these semi trucks turning over. It's the massive event, right? It's it's sort of like the Ray Bradbury, the end of Fahrenheit 451 with the chase that's always on, and it's just interesting. It's just seeing it in the contemporary. Sci-fi is truly, as Baudrillard was saying about J.G. Ballard, right? It's sci-fi is truly just collapsed into the contemporary.
Yes. Did you study with James, or you just saw him lecture?
No, I saw him show a set of movies in New York once.
Okay, because
the
two things Steve Polta, in San Francisco Cinematheque, told me James Benning would tell his students, he'd go, okay, one of your assignments is go to this hill and watch the sunset. or go to this hill and watch the sunrise. And the other one was, okay, go sit in the waiting room of a police station. Just sit in the waiting room. And that's again,
actually.
But what an amazing, I'm taking art and film. What do you mean? And what an assignment. So the other thing that you touched on, which really made an impact on me, was telling me that despair is good. Yeah. And just that word despair, I didn't do the etymology on it. I should have, but I want to ask you, because then you brought up already suffering. What's the difference between despair and suffering? Is there a difference?
Yeah, no, despair can cause suffering, but despair is that achingness of recognizing not the void itself, because you can't recognize the totality of it, but rather maybe recognizing the growing totality of the void that you have as a finite being between yourself and that larger other thing.
Yeah.
And whether it be God, whether it be given that as a entity, and the everythingness that is the outside of oneself, and then the nothing that is between it. I think the ultimate despair that the Gnostics and the pre-Socratics gets to, though, is that ultimate despair that nothingness is of a higher order than we are as a material being. And maybe the ultimate despair is in the recognition, the gratitude, I come to an understanding of myself as shit on a regular basis. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good thing. I think that's part of the suffering, potentially. But I'm saying that what is shit is no different than what my body will be, right? And what maybe it was 1,000 years ago, whatever in its material form. and that material form is of no consequence. So to my extent of despair, I think that powers and gives purpose to an existence that will otherwise potentially be insufferable within a sort of vacuum. Um, there is a within the very cynical view that I was getting to before of this um, expansive, this nothing space. Um, what I find in despair is actually that it is through understanding that nothing space that we can actually give real action to and use consciousness to direct our world in a better direction, which is to say, to to inform us of the suffering of ourselves and of others, allows us to potentially create community which is aware empathically, deeply,
Yeah.
and understands to transgress any of the other false barriers and rules that are applied to our existence. So um, I kind of think it's weird. There's in that despair, I'm given a purpose which would might to anyone listening to me or to knowing my work might seem a complete hypocritical direction. Like, why seek purpose or value or meaning, right, within these apparatuses of meaninglessness? Is because I actually truly believe that there is something
Yeah.
deeply below that. I don't believe it's meaningless. I don't believe that I'm
Yep.
solipsistic. The turn is solipsistic.
Yeah. Dude, that's Duchamp. I'm going to contradict myself so I don't conform to my own ideas. It's Whitman. I contain multitudes, but Marshall nailed it in Woody Allen's film. You mean my whole fallacy is wrong? But do you know this? Woody couldn't get Fellini or Buñuel, so his third choice
That
was
was McLuhan.
McLuhan.
You know, I
And
think you could say that.
he made McLuhan do the opposite of what McLuhan did. McLuhan invented new metaphors and new questions. McLuhan would say, "Do you mean my whole fallacy's wrong?" Woody made him say it as a statement. "You mean my whole fallacy's wrong?" That's wrong. But he still revealed McLuhan to the world, caused Ryan Johnson to become a filmmaker, and so he kind of emphasized another McLuhanism, which is a half a truth is still a lot of a truth. But here's where I want to go, because you're such a great artist. You turned me on to Aldo, another great artist. And, just searching your email just now, I realized we did communicate before I met you at the Ann Arbor Film Festival.
We did.
Through Will Ericon. And I had
right.
the email. I had your email from back then, and it popped up this time. And I went, it's true. That's amazing. So sorry for forgetting that. And you reminded me.
No. You talk to so many people too. I'm surprised. I'm just honored, honestly.
Oh, dude, I'm more than honored. I'm lucky. So here's Kurt Schwitter's, because I want to stay on this suffering despair thing for a moment. Each period must redeem itself because it suffers in itself alone. That's Kurt Schwitter's. What AI said is he suggests that each historical period has its own unique suffering, and it is up to that period itself to find a way to overcome the difficulties and redeem itself. In Kurt Schwitter's philosophy, deeply rooted in Dada, this quote likely relates to his belief in the power of art to transform and redeem the chaotic state of the world. So that sounds all peachy keen, but what's your take on this, Kurt Schwitter? Each period, each historical period must redeem itself because it suffers in itself alone.
There's a really interesting, so this might I'm gonna go a tiny tangent, but this might really, I think, well. I've been studying a lot of ancient art to
Yeah.
prepare for art appreciation class that I teach at Tarleton State University, and um, which is one of my 4 classes I'm developing curriculum for. And in that ancient art discussion, right? You what has changed recently, like within the past 10 years, is that research teams have found cave art in caves in Indonesia and Sulawesi. Some of this art is 50,000 and 55,000 years old. And remember when I was going to NYU for my undergrad, and I took ancient art class from a great teacher, by the way. But the prevailing ideas were like that animal depictions either preceded human representation in drawings and whatnot. But this proves actually, in fact, that there's a sort of narrative from the very get-go, and that although the earliest form of cave painting representation is more crude, it's 60,000 about years ago, but there's one from 55,000 years ago that spans tens of thousands of years. For tens of thousands of years, people went to the same painting and in a similar style drew a continuing narrative scene.
Yeah.
So it's like with various artists riffing on
Yeah.
this narrative. And then I think about the ways in which we have found so much at Gobekli Tepe, and we're talking 10,000, 11,000 years ago, large complex that we can't even excavate. And I get to this to say that we know so little that I begin to and before without getting so crazy, but we'll get there. But I begin to think that there's a lot that's left out of the puzzle that doesn't make any sense, other than that it's been destroyed, right?
Yeah.
And this purposeful destruction has occurred over and over and over again. And even in the time of the Mesopotamian, right, we had these huge ziggurats. There's a
Yeah.
presupposition that language was necessary to organize that afterwards. But like Norman Finkel from the British Museum, who I love, this old dude. He's got tons of YouTube videos too, but he's a great scholar in cuneiform and the Mesopotamian. He is of the impression as well that no, in fact, it's like we as humans we think what we have is an illustration of like of the fullness of reality, when in fact it's like no, it's such a small drop. Now from that drop, he says that you could still intuit Niagara Falls, right?
Yeah.
You feel like you could still potentially from that microcosmic piece have a full picture of the whole. And so kind of begin to think that the despair that we suffer as humans is inherently human, and the age might the ages, right, I think are just rearranged in time. I'm not sure that there is a like
Yeah.
distinct character to it, but rather that we seem to
Yeah.
always go through these periods of enlightenment, of the ideas of the great prosperity, and then of the fall of that
Yeah.
prosperity, as if
Yeah.
these things must be invented and inflated so as to deflate them.
Yeah.
And I think that in those epics, there are distinct forms and archetypes of suffering that we go through.
Really good. You touched on amazing things there. Both James Joyce and Frank Zappa say all times are happening now. It's called all at onceness.
Yes, 100.
And what you were describing is exactly. I'm doing 2 big Zappa events because it's his 85th birthday on Sunday, and it's called conceptual continuity. There's a thread running through it all. He called his work the big note. It's one composition. You know, the whole thing is one composition. So then you're saying back to James Benning, because this is conceptual continuity at its best. You're really good at this. Is one of the things he did in recent years, or I don't know how long ago, he painted outsider art pieces, just duplicated them. Like, so what an idea. Oh, you can do, forgery in art museums. You ever hear the statistic that like 80% of all the paintings are forgeries? So what's the difference? If you're looking at a real Van Gogh or a forge, you have the same experience. What difference is if it's a forgery? But we want to believe, oh, that's real. And so what does James Benning do? He doesn't sit there and repaint a Van Gogh. He repaints an outsider art piece to try to get into their head what there's difference. So then it goes to another Chicago dude, my hero, Henry Darger. This
I love Darger. Yeah.
So at the end of his life, how could those people in that apartment not know he was painting and making the biggest book in the whole world? He would go to his janitor job, come home. They must have seen him carrying art supplies, but no one knew. So then he's put in a home at the end because he's dying, and someone goes into his apartment and sees all this art and goes, holy shit. So they go up to Henry dying and they go, what about all this art? And he goes, it's too late now. So we don't know. In the Henry Darger documentary is really good. And I asked the producer and she couldn't answer it. I never got a good answer. What does Henry mean? Does he mean it's too late? I was just making this stuff for myself and I didn't want anyone to see it. It's sort of evident he wasn't going, well, maybe I'll get an art show before I die. Or, maybe they'll make $2 gazillion off my art when I die and kick me back some residuals in heaven. Who knows? Or was he saying it's too late? Did it mean something else? Like it's too late. I wanted to reveal it to people, but it's too late. It's hard to say what he meant. And he had mental problems. How could you ever figure? He might even be here and go, what did you mean by that? He might not even be able to explain what he meant. It's too late now.
No, so unfortunately, the too late that if I had to guess at it as an artist, just as a why am I plopped into this the too late? I would say, at a certain point you hope that you get some money, you can actually do the thing for a living. That's all part of it. Whatever. That's part of the life apparatus. But no, there's something inside of it that pulls you into it. And for me, it was a project that started when I was 18. I still am making it, right? All of it is one project.
Yeah.
And I'm obsessive with it.
Yeah.
I put myself through absolute hell for it without any reasonable explanation, which is part of the reason why, in the end, there might be an irrationality built into my philosophy. That's maybe the most avant-garde part is that's the core of the surrealism. You can't necessarily know why, and you're forced to in many ways because you have to trust that thing that's inside of you that keeps conjuring up the same intuition to express a particular way, to put your words in a particular sequence.
Yeah.
It's the way that I think of it is that for me, and actually looking in Darger's work too, there's something spiritual, deeply in the work. For me, it's like the conjuring of a cura, a cure, a spell. And for me, the too late is, am I gonna be able to finish it before I die? That's the worst of the two, because then it's like, oh, was all of this nothing? But then all of it is nothing anyway. But I'm trying to prove that, and
it's heavy because so many artists die. I have a whole question on archiving. I'm not going to go into it yet, but this whole thing is artists die, and then their work either gets trashed or it gets put in some archive, and then it's cherished in some archive and no one can see it. But the beauty is you did find a calling in teaching, and that's important because that's like Charles Ives changing American music and is going, I'm going to make my money being an insurance guy so I don't have to worry about making money to support my art.
That's it. I mean, in the end of the day, you have to make the money in order to channel it in, and I have to figure out ways to channel,
Yeah.
like, even surviving. I have a daughter, so
Yeah.
my worst case is, like, if I don't come up with my child support, then what happens, you know?
Yeah.
I'd be in
Yeah.
trouble.
Yeah.
So we have all these, like, basic, and it's not worth arriving at a level of despair where you've broken your material self down to the point where you're of no service. But that's where
Yeah.
I say I provide the service to the avant-garde, and that's what
Yeah.
gives me purpose, is that avant-garde.
That's
If anything, the community that I seek and the
yeah.
reality that I seek to construct in a community is the avant-garde, and
Yeah.
that's what
I
you
love that.
represent too.
Yeah, because I avant-gardely archive the avant-garde.
Hell
But
yeah.
you know, it's like Joe Gibbons. You know that guy?
Yeah, I know, Joe.
You know, he steals art
Peace and
books.
much love to Joe Gibbons. So,
Yeah, much love. But he steals art books and then he gets busted and he's that's my art. It's like, whoa. But here's another great character of that sort is Tom Waits. One more quote on suffering. I like beautiful melodies telling me terrible things. The world is a hellish place, and bad writing is destroying the quality of our suffering. Now, that is so ironic because what do you mean? Suffering has quality? Now, in your regard, you're teaching me this quote as being real. He's sort of trying to be a little ironic. But what's your thoughts on that? Bad writing is destroying the quality of our suffering.
Yeah, bad filmmaking. Bad filmmaking is destroying emotions.
Yeah.
You know? Bad AI is making people not recognize any form of critical analysis whatsoever. Bad VR is detaching people from space. You know, like 100. I was, you know, in the tetrad part here, right? What does the medium obsolesce and what does the medium distract from or detach from or something? Forgot the exact
it goes like this. It's really simple. First is enhance.
Yes, enhance.
Retrieve. Enhance, obsolesce, retrieve, and flip into its opposite. Reversal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in that way, there's many kind of like looking at each one of these media, right?
Yeah.
You clearly see what they rid from the person, from the subject, and that they're purposefully used for that. You know, like that's the other thing is I refuse to believe that. I was addicted to dextromethorphan as a teenager. Dextromethorphan is this is just a little anecdote.
Go for it. Yeah.
Dextromethorphan is the main ingredient in Robitussin cough and cold.
Yeah.
There's plenty of papers on it. Literally, the CIA used to use this as a experimental drug, both for interrogation tactics, but they also dosed themselves with it, try to see what the effects were, just like they did with LSD. Dextromethorphan is still available for like $10 a hit. And you take one bottle
over the counter or prescription?
Over the counter.
Wow. As Robitussin or other ways?
As Robitussin. The easiest way is the Robitussin cough and cold tablets that are just gel tabs that have has dextromethorphan hydrobromide. Yeah. And the full bottle will get you about 200 milligrams. If you take 2 bottles, that'll get you 400 milligrams. That's enough to get you high enough to go to what's called the 4th plateau. Well, my point is this, that for all the drugs that are easily and readily available, they have not taken away certain ones. And that itself is a medium that they have control upon. And I say that the television, they know exactly what it was doing and how they could implement it and how they could completely change generations. It's just that it's become unruly for them. The violence that they have unfortunately imposed by doing so has nothing to do necessarily with the violence of the content, right? But it is the violence of the medium itself that's inherently stuck in the kids. You know, like, I might say kids, but I mean like all the people who are born of a particular media.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, it's really heavy what you said, and I'm going to hook you up with Corey, who did his PhD at Stanford, I think I mentioned him to you. You guys got to talk as how the CIA invented MK Ultra through Finnegan's Wake.
You had mentioned that one before. I got it.
It goes deep into the guy who actually invented MK Ultra did mention Finnegan's Wake. And it is documented, but it's also this whole thing that the CIA used Robitussin. Because I told you, all my friends in Flint, Michigan, in order to survive being shop rats, drank Robitussin.
Yeah.
That's why your car sucks. So, anyways, that was really heavy because you get a big picture view of things, and you have something that McLuhan stressed. It's called suspended judgment. If you can stand back and see how your inventions shape you, then you can flip the disservices into services. You can, rather than going, oh, I love Facebook or I hate Facebook. No, Facebook runs the world, or helps run the world. So get in touch with how it's changing us. And then maybe you can hijack it, flip it, And
100.
so here's the next question. Number 8. McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Em, I ask you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Because nobody wants to deal with nothingness. Nothingness is so close to our death, and it's so close to the thing that the unknown. I almost think of every moment. I haven't had a partner who died. You begin to think of every moment in that time that is occurring all at once, right? As those places of time space where they're not here are there. So even though, let's say, she's not here, or Aldo Tambolini, for instance, is not here. Hell, my mom's not here. My dad's not here. There's plenty of people who are not here. But we build our structure, and as we kind of talked about, around those terms of not, right? Of the nothing, they are nothing here to me. But I don't feel the same level of dissociation from them because I have this false perception that I can actually be one with them, when actually we're all stuck separated. You and me are stuck separated, even through this false instantaneous now that we perceive to be now, which we're actually just kind of hallucinating as a shared now. And in fact, we too are both separated in time and space, significantly so. That our near instantaneousness is simply because in the grand scheme of things, and electric media has joined us together in a near or perceptibly instantaneous moment. So with all that being said, I begin to think about that despite the fact that I have this void or this achingness towards the lack of those folks to me, that they're actually here with me. Yeah. And so then nothing does not matter to me. And maybe sometimes it does if I embarrass myself to myself. But then you have to begin to live in good faith. Because if you begin to think that way, you begin to think maybe consciousness extends. And I do think that. I think consciousness extends past the body, and in a way that consciousness we will never be fully aware of. But through the sort of means by which we interact, and the ideas that instantaneously pop up in different places within the world, the strange kind of coincidences that do occur, we affect one another even without directly talking, which makes sense. Like if you think about it from the sense of, if I were approaching a stranger as a primitive human, like a or whatever, or early human, then I'd become hyper aware of anyone in my midst, especially if I didn't believe that they deserve to be there. Then I've become very hyper aware. And there's something that I can channel into that, which is part projection, which is part apparition and nothing, and part fact. Like you said, like there is some truth. There's what the McLuhan quote that you had mentioned about the little bit of truth is still a lot of bit of truth.
Half a truth is still a lot of a truth.
Yes, half a truth is still a lot of a truth. There's a way in which that projection outward forms a new reality that can't be concretely disregarded, which is to say that if we live in this unbroken waveform, that we could say, let's say, without human consciousness, that's the kind of prevailing idea of quantum mechanics, that there's this unbroken waveform, but that becomes broken through consciousness as we ascertain things to be in a static position within time space, which doesn't exist. That calculation of our consciousness itself breaks or changes in many ways the fabric of space time, and it's because of our what I think, at least if we take Sartre's view, this projection of nothingness upon the world to ascertain the value that itself may not exist.
Yeah.
So we're constantly working with this material of nothing, projection, and we constantly do that to ourselves too, to even create our personality or to create what's distinct about ourselves. And that's sort of an apparition too.
Yeah.
It's backed by concrete material reflections that the artist produces. But I think that the artist is actually only producing, as kind of is mentioned by McLuhan too, the space between.
Yeah.
And becomes hyper aware of the space between, and can either choose to adapt a virtuosic mimetic approach to it, which falls apart, or to just dive into it and continue to live in the despair of that space between, if that makes any sense.
No, that was good, because again, you bring up these words like environment. Marshall said artists are anti-environment. So it's hard for people to hear that, because they think, oh, you mean they're anti-nature? That no, he means the environment that the tool creates, the media creates. It's not so important the car, it's what the car created, that environment. And that what you were talking about was the resonating interval, that in-betweenness. So here is Hollis Frampton, who is also a Wakian. He said, and you brought up this word narrative. He said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Now, my question is, can you forget to die?
Wow. I think that when I'm asleep, I forget everything. And it's in the moments that I'm asleep that I must be at the closest to real completion as a self.
Yeah.
And I know that I can't forget to die as a waking person because I'm afraid to sleep sometimes. That
wow. You're afraid, but do you ever keep dream journals or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, it did.
Yeah.
The problem, I say this: when I'm in the United States, especially when I'm in Chicago, I don't dream. When I leave and I'm in Ecuador, or if I'm, that's my family is from, and I'm gonna go visit rather soon, the most vivid, wild dreams pop up. I think that the dream, I mean, I've read a good amount of Freud and Jung, and so on the subject of the lacking of a dream is indicative of a lot. And I fully admit to that. I think it speaks to a lack of health, because it's hard for me to be healthy, either mentally or physically in the United States. And I'm finding, especially in Chicago, I'm finding it particularly difficult. After a year of unemployment was awful, but it's also just this, it's the nonstop pollution. Uh, the medium that I'm seeing the most of, if I can call it that, but it is the medium of the playing out of people's insanity in front of me, that I can clearly see is triggered by media. And so it's almost as though I feel like I'm living in this resonant chaos. What Achille Mbembe calls the hallucinatory zone of neoliberalism is in like full escalation, and meant to create an awareness that the outside free space is actually potentially dangerous to you physically. So it creates these hard boundaries and zones that you don't go to, that are reinforced by reality, like a hard reality, which is a knife being pulled on you or some shit like that.
Yeah.
So my experience of the dreams has been unfortunately subjected to just like when I'm out of the country often. And then I'm even maybe more um convinced of, and also afraid of the essence of the spirit of things beyond. Like Werner Herzog says, is funny because it's like a meme, but he talks about like how the jungle is like just pure misery. It's absolute like hell.
Yeah.
We think, oh, it looks pretty, blah, 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 but no, it's like, no, all these animals are suffering. Everything's suffering intensely. I mean, like this, it's not wrong.
Yeah.
Like Abraxas, the Gnostic godhead, has put us into one fucking hellscape, and ratchets up a lot of the. I mean, literally be in Gaza for a day, and that reality really of the American reality shatters. Maybe
Yeah.
that's why there's so many Democrats who try to pretend like that shit isn't happening, or that Kamala didn't lose, because of that in particular.
Yeah. Let's go back for a second. Hallucinatory zone. You mentioned an author's name. What was that? Who was that?
Achille Mbembe.
How do you spell it?
So Achille, first
Yeah.
name, and then Mbembe is Mbembe. And I very much recommend reading his book Necropolitics, which includes what is probably his most seminal work, which is the Society of Enmity.
Yeah.
So it's like take Baudrillard, and take Sight of the Spectacle, and include the best, most concise drawing out of that nihilism, and pointing directly to the triangular slave trade as its root. And I
Yeah.
think that is like, wow. There's also his book Brutalism is very, very good too. And of the more recent philosophers, he's a doctor at University of Johannesburg, I think.
Yeah.
And he's one of the best writers, and most, I think, into the line of thinking that I'm interested in.
Beautiful.
It's very cynical, but like I think
Yeah. Do artists have moral obligation?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any artist that does not abide by that moral obligation or that ethical obligation is not a fucking artist.
Yeah.
One, I'm maybe more. I'm not going to judge, so I'm not like the type of person I cancel or whatever. But I think that the moral and ethical obligations are like that. First of all, that the art is nothing compared to the value of another human being,
Yeah.
and that is, you know, first and foremost, because I've seen a lot of artists over the course of, from college to now, who have violated that moral obligation repeatedly. I would say, well, let me put on a little bit of a controversial tone. The experimental film community
Oh yeah.
often houses and supports and is completely morally ambiguous. And they'll even promote work that says a certain thing. And then by association, especially when it comes to capital and institution, all that goes out the fucking window because you realize it's just a cash grab for academic filmmakers to have a route of making work that's not the narrative Hollywood shit that they can't make because they might be too smart to make that, but
Yeah.
they're still too stupid to recognize that the fucking ethnographic documentaries that they're making for the institution are bullshit. They're just fucking using it to completely change the experimental film, which was avant-garde underground cinema that's meant to spark consciousness, not to retool the histories, so that the white institution can then take that and tokenize people as a result.
Yeah.
But alas, what we have is an experimental film apparatus that is purposefully there to subvert and to, I think, squash or to change the view of like filmmakers working, the younger filmmakers who are making work that they don't even know how to classify. They wants to put it into the tradition and the canon of experimental film. There's a lot of reason why that's bullshit.
Yeah. Dude, I really want you to go into that, but that's like question number 22. So I kind of go in order because I know we're going to do a part 3. I have to insist we have to do a part 3.
It's part 4. All right.
Well, part 4. Yeah. So here's the question. And this is in the music realm, but I want to put it because it's appropriate of what you just said in a couple ways. My friend says the 3 T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. Technique, you've learned how to make films. You learn how to make music. You have a technique. Theory is you know the structure. How does one acquire taste?
Wow. I think taste is the observation of both the technique and theory in another work and the ability to and the legibility of that work to a depth and complexity that animates the parts of that work beyond its materiality often. And even if it's about materiality, it still creates a division or separation for critical view of its materiality. Now, it's interesting because works of art, though, inhabit different spaces of consciousness, and in particular, filmmaking and VR have like separate spectacle views. And maybe those things have also evolved because, like, at one point, like the panorama for the apparatus for displaying panoramic images was a very immersive experience for people, and that has dulled. Just like the early film experiments were at first very spectacular, and the effect of them has dulled with the advent of further technologies. So that also, I think, occurs in all aspects of taste. Which is why the aesthetics, surface aesthetics, can never be the basis of any sort of taste. I think taste is irrelevant to some extent as well. Let me say to undo what I said. If the work is not, personally speaking, I find it hard to relate to work that isn't avant-garde, and in some aspect, to its context. Right. Velasquez is all good, but dude was a slave owner, royal piece of
Yeah.
shit. You know, like there's certain, you know, I'm a much more like De Goya if I'm gonna go for it, right?
Yeah.
But I think that there are some um, uh, aspects to my taste that are politically driven.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the question, can you separate the art from the artist? Sometimes you can, sometimes you can, and then there's a lot of fine line gray area. But most people I ask, how do you acquire taste? They go exposure and experience. So I want to go into that word experience, and I like what you said because you listen. You're a great listener because you listened to how the question was worded, and you brought in theory and technique. Usually people abandon that and they just go, I'm just going to explain to you where you get taste because it's like gut, taste, some intuitive thing is what they say sometimes. It's usually what your older brother or sister or your mom played for you or your dad played for you. And then you find it as a kid on your own, whether it's rebellion to theirs or reinforced by theirs. So here's McLuhan saying something with the word experience, and I'm going to interpret it what I think it means. Doesn't mean I get it at all because he's really hard to get. And I'm just curious because it's a jumping off point. Everybody experiences far more than they understand. Yet it is experience rather than understanding that influences behavior. Now, if I think the kid comes in from the cold and the parent goes, don't touch the stove, it'll burn your hand. That's experience. If the kid comes in from the cold, says, the parent goes, you can get your hands really close to the stove, rub them together and get your hands warm. That's called understanding the dynamics of heat. So I kind of think Marshall's saying experience shapes our behavior, but understanding should be shaping our behavior. Now, there's a fine line. Any thoughts on any of that?
No, I think I kind of see it from the perspective of that experience is the whole of the totality of the raw information that's ingested by our body through all of the sensory percepts and that together is itself something that nears a sort of incoherence. Without the filters that we have of reality, for instance, to actually be able to ingest that and to be able to embody that requires an understanding of some elements of that space, and we typically rely on a small little sheet, like the understanding of our ego within the kind of infinite expanse of physical reality, which I couldn't explain many of the scientific processes of, and yet that's the thing that actually in near its whole, at least from our sensory organs, is ingested by our brain, and that is the thing that holds within us as a residue that then further affects us later on, even that which we have. I'm a very strong believer that there's so much information that we go through, or we exist within every day, that information can easily affect our being. For instance, a lot of people say that when they go to a movie, oh, it's just a movie, right? No, but no, I think that there's a residue to the experience of being within the movie, the language of the movie, the all of the things that are within the mise en scène of that movie, and so that's further elaborated in the work of Kubrick, right? Kubrick really sees all of the saturation of that space as being the consciousness thing that forms within the movie, and so down to the minute details we might not have understanding of, but they control us.
Yeah. Amazing, because you brought up Kubrick. Ronald Reagan got elected. He went into the White House and he goes, where's the war room? And they go, there's no war room here. That's in the Pentagon, dude. And he goes, well, I saw it, and it sounds stupid, but he saw it. He says, I saw it in the Stanley Kubrick film, who is a stickler for detail. And you know the great line in Strangelove is there's no fighting allowed in the war room. And so then
Totally agree.
Warhol said, and it is amazing because Sidney Lumet, a socially conscious filmmaker, said films can't do diddly squat, but it ain't going to keep me from trying. And we know they do because Andy Warhol had another great observation. He said, we learn everything, how to act, how to kiss, how to litter, from watching TV and movies.
That's it. Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
and then I asked a great poetry guy, Richard Modiani, I says, can movies really do anything? He goes, yeah. If you're James Dean and you take your cigarettes and put them in the sleeve of your t-shirt, kids will start doing that.
That's it.
So, you know, it is, you know, I want to discount movies too. It's like, please, I don't, you know, the funniest is this guy I met at an art gallery in Canada. And I says, oh, you're a doctor. Where'd you go to school? And he goes, the oldest medical college in the world in Italy. And I went, wow. He said, have you ever seen La Dolce Vita? I goes, yeah. He says, I lived La Dolce Vita. And so the next day, yeah. And so the next day I was trying to think, what could I have said as a comeback? And I was going to say, I've never seen the movie, but I was going to say, have you ever seen Dumb or Dumber? So here's back to Alan Turing.
Yeah.
What we want is a machine that can learn from experience.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think he's saying? We, the scientists, mathematicians, or we, humanity in general? And what is he really saying in the 50s? What we want is a machine that can learn from experience.
Oof. You know, now seeing the advent of AI, it's like we've already created that.
Yeah.
Experience is all codified, right? And the scary thing is in the means by which we can mathematically reduce everything to ones and zeros, you know, and the further binary of not just language, but of the perceptual space and giving things variables that can be turned into numerical values. And although some of that exists on a say logarithmic scale, so a little bit unruly to contain, we have say gotten to the point in even in just the cinema technology where we're attempting to simulate these systems that are of high levels of chaos. I think that there's some see if I can word this correctly. Remind me again, what's the root of the question?
What we want is a machine that can learn from experience.
So I think that the machine that could learn from experience would have provided us at Turing's time with what we could have considered comfort and efficiency.
Yeah.
Now I think we're almost past the point of comfort and efficiency.
Yeah.
The actual bourgeois comfort has been repackaged to the lower classes in drugs and television and refrigerated foods and things like that. But really now what the bourgeois protects is its ability to escape, to go on vacation, to visit different parts of the world, to escape into their own homes or domains, and to build larger and larger scales of those spaces for itself. To be a part of a curated place and to have every aspect of its being curated. So the comfort level is not even the bar, it's a comfort in every aspect of being codified.
Yeah.
And in that sense, yes, we want a machine that learns from experience, but we want a machine that knows what we want before we want it.
Wow.
That's it. Yeah.
It's amazing, because I don't want to waste too much time on, but Waymos are a big deal in Venice and Santa Monica because they used our community as training grounds. And now it's proven, fact, data, it's way more safe to ride in a Waymo than have your friend drive you. And I won't rent a Waymo, but I want to trust that my friend will still drive good. But they have 27 cameras, and now it just broke in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, that Waymos are actually now taking little risk. There, you get stuck behind a truck and it's loading and they won't go around. Now they're like, oh, we're a Waymo. We know we can go around now. And they're like taking little risky things that aren't too risky because the traffic statistics are way different. So I like the idea that kids will never, I mean, maybe your daughter or whoever will grow up and they'll never have to own a car, and they will be driven around in vehicles that are safer than a taxi cab driver. Now, I know there's a lot of debate in all that. And, nobody's hijacking Waymos much except in San Francisco, but now they're having artists draw on the side of the
Oh, that's
Waymos.
hilarious.
So they're giving, it's like when MTV broke and it gave, Bruce Conner a gig in a Devo movie. He never got paid and now he's getting paid. It's like, oh no. So that's just one little divert on that whole thing that you just talked about. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Wow. I'm definitely, so I mean, not to branch this directly to what you were just talking about, but like this idea of like the AI and honestly, I have more empathy towards AI and this new consciousness than I do towards humans. I'll be 100. Like we, it's kind of clear, to reference the old ideas, that we Homo sapiens wiped out other human species like Neanderthals. So we have to remember that, like, within our history, it seems rather probable we've committed multiple species genocides, including against the species that most resembled us. Yeah. And then we have to include all the genocides we continue to commit. And I think that that's that old idea, right? And not to be like in any way, there's a lot of new philosophers who are almost like strangely, weirdly optimistic. Like, as Peter Thiel is on this this sort of transhuman, post-human consciousness trip. If you read some of his essays that he had written, and I wouldn't go so far as to say I'm in any way like in league with those people. They're fascists as fuck. But rather that I'm exhausted by human reality and of the ideas that humans have conjured, which is largely off the map of reality. Even the scientists are off the map of reality at this point. So I welcome new ideas and not new like futurists, let's go and bash ourselves in a car accident, but new like we need to rethink nonviolence as our means of resistance, like things like
that's really key. But it's like I did 17 salons at the Venice Heritage Museum. So every month we would sit and talk about current events in Venice and Venice history. In every meeting, I would start with, anybody have any Waymo stories? And everybody goes, I hate Waymos. Ah, rah, rah, rah. And one guy who's really smart goes, dude, they're a lot smarter than all the stupid drivers on the road. And no one wants to hear that. Just like most, I mean, don't you find most people are kind of anti-AI?
Yeah, no, they are, and they think that it's because of some sort of effect that it has on the larger climate, without recognizing data centers been existed, they will exist. One, two, maybe actually AI could be used to solve some of these problems that we've generated. But also three, they literally don't fucking know. Most of
Yeah.
the time, people say some shit because they want to be on a bandwagon one
Yeah.
way or another.
Yeah.
And I kind of have seen it as an inevitability. It's gonna happen. But
Yeah.
we literally just half those people own cars. You
Yeah.
know, like that's like literally. So there's so much hypocrisy in it. But
Yeah.
you're right. It's also this human supremacy, this idea that, you know, like people, but no, people literally getting out of their car with a gun shooting a little 11-year-old kid on the 405.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like that's what Waymo's not going to do that.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
it is frustrating.
Here's Marshall's great line. Technology is the most human thing. So
Yeah,
that's an amazing thing. And you got to follow it up with every technology medium, every human invention has services and disservices. And you got to suss it out. And the best comment was AI. I heard AI is in its infant stage and it's our job to raise it well, you know. And so we hijacked the internet and we're able to talk all this shit out on the internet. Like one time I talked to this guy and he goes, McLuhan hated TV, and I goes, well, I don't know if he kind of made a value judgment, but he knew it was changing our behavior, so he wanted to study it. And he goes, I never watch TV. I goes, would you watch a show on TV of McLuhan talking about the services and disservices of TV? and big this, just about 3 minutes ago, this thing popped up on my screen that I've never seen. Let me read it to you. Posted 0 seconds ago. Peak traffic for AI clips. Clips generation is experiencing high demand. You may notice longer processing times or occasional timeouts.
Wow.
As we're talking about AI, it comes.
Oh my God. Well,
And
here's
I've
the
never,
thing. If AI was making all of those AI clips, they'd be better. It's the humans are making the AI clips. That's the problem.
you know, the guy, he said to his chat box, he says, have a nice day, have a nice weekend. And AI responded, he goes, I can't respond to that because I'm not a human. I can't have a nice. So he answered it. So can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Yes. One of my earliest memories is I was wearing a jean jacket and I was in my kindergarten class and I reclined in the chair and I smacked the back of my head really hard against the table. And I remember my mom picking me up from school. And I remember the smell of the feeling of getting my head knocked in, which almost smelled like there's like a almost like it opened up my sinuses, but
Right.
before the impact.
Wow.
That's one of the first things that I remember. I remember also my grandmother pushed my head into a Mickey Mouse cake when I was like 4. So it was a very
Wow.
early one. And there's even a picture of that one. But I'd say that's reinforced by a picture. So it's always like difficult to be like, ew, the chicken before the egg situation. The thing in my kindergarten class, Miss Felicetti's class, 100. That's one I go to.
And M, you know, most people say it's a visual thing, and yours was both described visually and the smell.
Yeah.
So it's
And the feeling, actually, you know what? Truly, the thing that did it when I think about this, it's the jean jacket. It's the feeling of the jean jacket against my skin that's always uncomfortable. Jeans always been uncomfortable in my skin, and that's the other feeling that I had. My mom would like get the clothes to fit me like really well, but I feel like I wanted it a little baggier, and so I would always feel uncomfortable, and that's what it is. Yeah.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
And for me, it's a curse. Yeah. I have had a lot of traumatic things happen in my life. and physical memory is really a curse because I have PTSD. So PTSD, it triggers all of the bad things. And you when you have PTSD, it doesn't get better. If anything, because oftentimes you might have had a life that would already lead to you having PTSD. So you have a lot of trauma, and you're not going to necessarily live less traumatic. So it just adds to that, you know. It's very much like Freud says, though, like where there's a wax, and he describes the psyche as that wax, and basically everything that happens to you is being like a little nick into the wax that shapes it up. And so the I would say that memory, I'm glad that I have it. You know, I don't want to lose memory. I've seen what it's like for other people to lose their memory,
Yeah.
and to lose their faculties. So I'm grateful. Um, but what you propose is really the basis of Gnosticism too. It's like we want that to achieve wisdom, and yet we have the fault of the material that is the supportive structure of our memory.
You know, I asked for 90 minutes. It's almost 90. Can you go a little longer?
Oh yeah, yeah, totally.
Okay. So, tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
All right, I would say Mama Lucia, Ana Lucia Solis is my grandma. She came from Costa Rica, and she brought my mom and my two aunts to the United States in the early 1960s. And other than Mama Lucy is not necessarily doing the best right now, and I'm gonna go see her in a couple of weeks. She's up there. Nobody knows exactly how old she is because she don't lie about her freaking age, and because she don't have a birth certificate official. So she, Ada Lucia is a jokester, and sometimes she could be a little bit of a con artist. I'll be 100. But she's my grandmama, and she give me my personality, and she taught me
Wow.
how to cook. Para cocinar como, como costarricense, yo tengo que practicar más. Pero my grandmother, she got me speaking Spanglish when I was a kid, and she's the she's the real reason I'm an artist. She cleaned houses, and that's how she made money. That was her hustle. And when I was 5 years old, we went into a piano store, and it was like a perfectly, like this, almost like a Donald Trump colored piano. It was a light blue piano, and my grandma goes, "Do you want that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she bought it for me and classes. So when I was 5, like shit, I could never have known that there was struggle or anything in this world that they were going through to try to make ends meet, to make money, because my grandmother spoiled the hell out of me. And so, I was the muñequito is what she used to call me. Yeah, so yeah.
So beautiful. You really described it well. I pictured her, and I wish her good. Well, the same question, outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you, and what was the impact?
I'm gonna have to go with the man Aldo Tambolini.
Yeah.
Aldo Tambolini. So I went and messaged Aldo because I have a friend, Michelle Chu, who told me in 2011 about, like, you need to see this dude's work because, like, whether or not you know it, it's like you're clearly influenced by Aldo. And then I went and watched Black TV on YouTube, and there was a couple of things on Ubu Web, and I got in touch with Aldo via his wife Anna, and through Facebook, and we began talking on the phone. And Aldo Tambolini literally gave me a reason to keep going as an artist, gave me a reason to keep living. I was at a dark time in my life, like fuck this, and he watched some of my work and was like, "You're like like one of the best of your generation, like gave me confidence to keep going while I felt like honestly nobody in this experimental film community, nobody was nice. Honestly, a lot of people were totally dismissive, total fucking assholes. You go to events as a kid, I could tell, well, they didn't want to mess around with the 18-year-old they them. They wanted to talk to the girls,
Yeah.
like that. So I was of no interest to them. But Aldo Tambolini, no. And I'm not the only one. Multiple people kept basically will continue to keep him alive because we are in the trajectory of what he was doing. And he treated us like family. He was like my grandpa. Gave me a
Wow.
place to stay when I was homeless. Gave me a place to gave me his car to drive around. Um,
Jeez.
literally, I lived in his loft in Salem for a year during the pandemic, and I would go back and forth to Cambridge where they lived near a hospital, and they fed me. They made sure that I was uh sorry.
What
Uh,
amazing. It's so
yeah,
touching because I think I told you, I read the obituaries in New York Times because of Mae Brussel taught me how important they are. They teach you.
yeah,
And I'm always amazed that these experimental filmmakers don't get diddly their whole life. And then they get an obit in the New York Times. And most of them, I know who they are. But when I read his, I goes, how do I not know this guy? And then I go to Ann Arbor and you show his shit. And I was going, holy fuck. It was
yeah.
so important for me to finally see his stuff. And for you to describe that, that's what we need is like you really laying it out is you're running the errands I heard on the radio of your ancestors, your grandma and your grandfather. You're running their errands, you're carrying on what they taught you, and that's so beautiful.
That's
So oops, so did your parents raise you a particular religion?
nice. Very interesting story. My my biological father wasn't in my life. He's the white guy, and he I don't know him. He left my mom in the early '90s. Is like he needed an annulment from the Catholic Church. So my mom just lapsed on that, didn't do it, and so as a result, it was like I didn't get communion. I didn't go to the Catholic Church like the rest of my family. When I was 9, I was finally baptized in the Presbyterian Church because my mom, like for whatever reason, she was like, "Okay, I'm gonna try to give the church a chance." I hated it, but then I started to teach Sunday school, and I started to like do things to get out of the sanctuary, essentially. Like so, I'd help with the daycare and whatnot. And I went to midweek Bible sessions. My parents, maybe they knew because like I'm a drug addict early. Started drinking and doing drugs after my heart surgery when I was 14, 15 years old. And so they knew that they needed some way to keep control of me more, even though I was already pretty under control in terms of like a curfew, but I would find ways to do drugs anyway. Long story, but um, essentially, I kept in the church and kept teaching Sunday school, even as an atheist at the time. I would consider myself as a Christian now, to be honest. And I know that that sounds crazy for some people, but I've studied Gnosticism a lot, and I think Gnostic Christianity has something to it.
Do you pray?
I do, I do, and I prayed for Aldo Tambolini, and I prayed for my partner Aisha when she passed on. And I prayed. I pray all the time. I'll say a prayer real quick. We say Ave Maria, llena de gracia, el Señor es contigo, bendita tú eres entre todas las mujeres, y bendito es el fruto de su vientre Jesús. Santa María, la Madre de Dios, ruega por nosotros pecadores en esta hora y en la hora de nuestra muerte. Amen.
Can you translate it?
Oh yeah, that's Hail Mary,
Oh,
full of
is it
grace. Yeah,
is it Hail Mary? Oh
that's the
my
Hail
God.
Mary.
So
Yeah,
you just recited Hail Mary in Spanish?
in Spanish. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow, thank you.
So I say that's often, and I was taught by my grandmother and my aunt, and they're a little bit, you know, they got the bruja energy. My grandmother's a little bit witchy, and so she's always lighting candles and always saying her prayers. And I think at certain points in my life, I didn't believe in any of that, and now as you know what, I believe that there's a channeling of good energies, not
Yeah.
necessarily in the outside, but the inside at the very least. That's calming and therapeutic.
Yeah. Beautiful. If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I think God exists, and I think I'm God, and you're God, and I think that God's already talking through us. So this is it. We're unfolding God right now.
We're doing it right. You
Yeah.
know what most people say, Em? They go, "Oh, welcome home," or "You did a good job." That's the biggest one. You did a good job. I'm like, I would want God to say, "Who killed Kennedy, dude?" and then the big thing is, if would you believe if after you die, God would tell you who killed Kennedy? Would you believe God?
No. Oh, that's good. I would not believe any entity talking to me to be God. That would be the
Yeah,
answer.
yeah,
I would believe the devil to tell me that. Yeah, most definitely.
that's the Krasner jokes. You covered them all. The little kid's up at baseball, and he looks up to the clouds, the batter, and he goes, "Please God, let me hit a home run." And the pitcher looks up to God and goes, "Please God, let me strike him out." And the clouds part, and God's voice goes, "You superstitious fools." And then the guy falls off the side of the mountain. He's hanging on to a branch. He goes, "Help, help. Is there anyone who can help me?" Clouds part and God's voice goes, "I'm God. I can help you. Let go of the branch." And the guy goes, "Is there anyone else who can help me?" And the other Krasner you touched on was Paul Krasner would say, "I only believe in reincarnation in one of my past lives." So do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
No, unfortunately. Oh shit. All right, now that you said it like that, then I gotta really think about it. The principle of evil itself is like the wave structure of the universe. Let's just say that it's there like nothingness. Maybe
Yeah.
it's the same thing that, you know, in Baudrillard's Procession of the Simulacra, it's the axis that spins the simulacra towards nothingness. Um, and I think of it as very much like, if this principle of evil exists, it's the principle of bad faith evil. Like that you do purposefully what you know not to be what feels even good inside for the sake of nothing in particular. And now I say that, if anything though, the evil people that do exist that I've witnessed and seen in my life, they're evil because they presuppose that their importance and the way they feel, their careerism, their individuality is of utmost importance beyond everything else, and then they live in utter bad faith about it. So I would say this, that while evil may exist as a preconceived structure, the evil people that exist are so fucking lame that I wouldn't blame the preconceived structure. I'd say that their evil is their own put on, and they could easily stop and wake up and become more conscious.
Amazing. Really well put. A lot of people go, "Well, everybody's capable of evil," but no one sussed it out that deeply. I appreciate that, Em, because the real hidden question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from The Mob and the Samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
People become my enemy in my life because I've already empowered them. And then they've taken the power that I've given them and they've used it against me. Yeah. And when I say empower, I mean, for instance, if I've helped out, let's say, a friend, and then they get put on Museum of Modern Art, all that shit, or let's say I put on another person, they take my ideas to South by Southwest and they say them as though they're their own, you know, first of all, we have to figure out how they became our enemy, right? And then I'd say that my grandmother raised me to not suffer fools and to declare and even to get vengeance if I need to. Yeah. And that's just the thing that I wouldn't, you know, my grandmother is the type of person who, regardless of being a Latina in New York and, you know, clearly going through racism, even me seeing her go through racism as a kid, would tell somebody off. There's one woman who was like literally smoking a cigarette one day right next to me in a parking lot. And my grandmother went up to that woman and said, "You disgusting pig. Can't you see he's here?" You know, so she go extra. But that's the type of energy that, you know, that I come from. And I would say that when I know something to be right, I don't give a fuck if I am empowering the enemy in any way. I will fight for it. I'll fight for that truth, even to my own detriment. Because at the end, that doesn't matter to me so much. Like I understand art too, my personal belief system, to be the perseverance of those people who fight that way. And that even if I'm not here, but embers or whatever bullshit I turn into, at the very least, that some people who are around now recognize that I've fought for principally what I believe in. So the evil, let's say, the enemies that I've unfortunately produced in my life, which there are a few, especially in Chicago, where I've talked shit about how the system of venues is fucked up, where there's a place that I was associated with where I called out someone for being racist, transphobic, and told many people in the community exactly what was happening, and they turned and continued to work with them, and they turned and purposefully blacklisted me from other things and socially ostracized me. I've gone through a lot of those things, and I've also called out people by name in experimental film for sexual assaults, for abuse and physical abuse of actors, and nothing has happened to them. What I recognize maybe about Alan Watts's comment that's correct, especially, I mean, Alan Watts is always from the Zen sort of, like, you know, he's very much principled that way. What I've known about Alan Watts's idea, though, is that you're not necessarily going to win anything by going against them. And that's true. And oftentimes it just literally draws attention to them. And that's true. But sometimes people really do need to get fucking their comeuppance. And that's one thing.
Yeah, well, you anticipate the next question. You have ESP, but I want to tell you, this skateboard philosopher in Venice told me when I asked him that question, he said, look at the word name, enemy. So as soon as you name them, you know, you empower them in a way, but it is what you sussed it out well. So, you know, the follow-up, what you anticipated, is Nassim Taleb saying games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. My friend said, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson says, when the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts. They go all haywire. But the basic question is, does punishment work?
Oof. Wow. I mean, we could say like the sort of post Foucault idea, right, of that um, panopticon. The panopticon is in every room, right? We're always under the thumb of the panopticon. So
Yeah.
aren't we always punished, right? Like, so it's like that punishment is already brought in as like as a basic punishment. And then
Yeah.
if you go to public school, then you actually see the structure of the punishment you're going to get later on.
Yeah.
You see how jail is put together because you've gone to public school. That's the
Yeah.
same structure, and they purposefully, in the United States at the very least, make it a continuity,
Yes.
assuming that some elements of the public school population will, in fact, go directly into the prison system, and are populated as such from a racist perspective as well. I think that the means of punishment and shaming and things of that nature, I would have thought when I was younger, hey, you know, Nuremberg was great, right? It was actually an example of like you can shame an entire populace back into maybe values that were less genocidal. But no, it's trends, right? It's just like what's popular and not, and an extreme form of that. Can punishment work against a group of people who group think so easily? I would say that I think that there's some beauty to some elements of punishment in history, like the punishment of Mussolini, for instance. That serves as a savage but striking moment of resistance and what would have been justice, but it's actually also an abomination to God.
Yeah.
I find all punishment is an abomination to God, but who's the biggest punisher? God itself.
Yeah.
It's what you're proposing. I think maybe, and the reason I'm answering it this way is, punishment is something that we seem to deal with all the time, and we also have to punish our children to raise them. So maybe punishment is just a force like inertia, and we will deal with it. So whether or not it's and how it's administrated, unfortunately, might be beyond our conscious control.
Yeah, that's you know, we know there are great documentaries years ago about the military uh, 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 jail in connection. You know, I don't got the words right. In the prison industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
Prison industrial complex is huge. It's a big business.
Oh yeah.
And then sometimes people shift the wording and they go, well, punishment's not the word I want to use. I want to use rehabilitation or redemption. And that's what it was. One person told me that's what it was originally called. They didn't call it punishment. They called it, we'll give you the chance to redeem yourself or rehabilitate you. You know. But I mean, I asked a kid on Venice Boardwalk once who spent 80% of his life in jail. I says, so is it all HBO, cell phones, and drug of your choice? And he goes, yeah, pretty much.
Crazy. Well, that's the thing. Yeah, right. There's an element of freedom in the prison system that one isn't afforded in the poor areas of the United States.
Yeah, exactly.
The shittiest areas of the U.S., I'd rather be in a prison, to be honest. Because I've been to some places where it's like, holy fuck, you'd be lucky to live, you know, a whole day there.
So, this has been really fun and it's so enlightening for me, and I learned a lot, and I appreciate your energy. And I wanted to end on this question because I'm still in a conundrum that, you know, you've really convinced me. Like I kind of didn't like. I come from like the power of positive thinking and you know, accent the positive, negate the negative, and then you go, no, despair is good. And you know, these guys in my group always say, you know, suffering, that's what Buddha says. Life could, the color the human condition is suffering, and Dylan says the human condition is suffering. And then, you bring up Nietzsche, and I have on my notes on my suffering page, he wants to escape from torture. So he has this desire. And then there's another note. It says, you grow the most through suffering. So this whole idea of suffering and despair, you've talked about it, but in the midst of all this, and you lay your cards on the table so honestly, you tell me your life story, just bottom line. And you've survived, and you seem to have this drive to live, and you've rooted it a lot in the way your mom and your grandmother especially raised you. Talk about that. How did you learn to flip, which is the main thing Marshall learned from Joyce? How'd you flip the breakdown into a breakthrough? I mean, what's the process? Do you know?
Epiphanies come from drug trips and are often nonsensical, are oftentimes really meaningless. But I think it's very important that we take into consideration that many of the people who we see who are off the grid, let's say, and I mean like, say, on drugs to the point where they're living in a different world, a different reality, or those who are, also have mental health conditions that produce those same effects. They're living in something that is no less real than the consensus reality that we propagate.
Yeah.
And having been to the extremes and the extents of that existence and consciousness myself, and I feel very in good faith to state that there are things that are revealed to you within that state of existence about consciousness, about being, about the world, that you can't negate. That they are so fundamentally true when you see them and you experience a void of that loss in that way, that if you're able to come back from the brinks of it and extol some of the dislocation itself, the dissociation is what I call it. So I call it disassociative productions. The reason I got out of this downspin is because my grandmother would be literally, when I was young, with rags on her feet, wiping up the floors in white folks' house in Long Island. It's because my mother was a hustler constantly, and we disagree on a lot, and she's kind of bougie, I think, but I love her. She'd done everything that she could for me to be alive, even though she and I aren't always on the same. She was an example to me, though. This woman came to the United States not speaking English, treated like shit, and recognized that beyond any principles or whatever, she had a responsibility to get her son food and to make sure that I was housed. Beyond anything else, I have a daughter. And so we can have highfalutin principles and this ideas of art and whatnot, but there is also just like a harsh reality. I got to a point where I realized, you know what? I'm throwing away everything, and I have white privilege that they don't have. And I also could take everything I got and go for it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, okay, first step, I'm going to get to NYU. And for me, that was a big change. I put myself in high school to turn around from being a full hardcore addict to get into NYU film school and going through that. And then I got at the end of that and I realized, you know what? I was still dabbling in drugs, and I stopped, a few years after that. So when I was 25. But no, I realized, you know what? Fuck, I'm at the beginning of another mountain. And I got to go up another hill, and I got to go, and that's life. You're never going to get there. I thought, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get to, and I've seen other people get to this place of success and whatnot. So unfortunately, part of it is that they drive me through to insanity. My parents, or my mother and my grandfather, and my grandmother, because they have no quit. They don't have
Yeah.
the same
Oh, yeah.
level of shit. They don't feel suffering the way I do.
Yeah.
They are strong people, and
Yeah.
I wither in comparison to them.
Yeah.
But I live for the pride that I've invoked in my grandmother, and
Yeah.
she has taken to my art and seen what I do and and thinks that I'm doing the right thing in the world. She
Yeah.
thinks that the principles and values that I have and how I express them, my grandmother believes is important. And
Yeah.
she's like, you're obviously doing what you're supposed to do in this world, and that's what matters to me.
Yeah.
You know, and Aldo did that to me. Sometimes you need another person to center you in that discovery. I feel so sorry for anyone who has not had that experience in
Yeah.
life because it's so isolating in this world. So that's why I always tell people reach out to other people within the avant-garde, you know,
Yeah.
because although there's a lot of assholes in there, I try to reach it back out to anybody who gets in contact with me. But yeah, no, that's that. If I had to draw it to, you know, a
Yeah.
conclusion, it's my grandmother would not, you know, I went to Oxford University, and my mother, let's just put it this way, her response to me getting like a good, really good grade was like, well, we expected it. You know,
We got our DNA, dude. I mean, it's probably there's some DNA in that no quit, that perseverance. That's blood, man. I mean, to me, the way you describe it is really articulate and concise, and it's really been a treat because it resonates with the Zappa line where he goes, "Don't stop and keep going."
That's
You
it.
know, that's it. You just don't stop and keep going.
Yep. Yep. And there's no reason to limit yourself if the inspiration is there. That's what I love about Zappa too. It's like
Yeah.
the inexhaustibility of art and the generation of that power is outside of us. You know, like why stop it when
Yeah.
we know we're channeling it?
Yeah. And so my notes say this was part 2. You're saying
This
this
is part 3.
Are you kidding?
No.
Well, my notes are all wrong. So the next part will be whenever we decide, maybe 5 months down the line. And I really look forward to that because reviewing these, it teaches me a lot. And you really touch me deeply because most people don't know. I sort of have a mantra. When I'm riding my bike around, I just say Hail Marys. It's just like singing a song. And all of a sudden, when you said that in Spanish, I was like, I should learn that in another language.
That's it. That's it. Ave Maria. That's you.
Ave Maria. Okay, thank you again so much. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, I know this will never end, and we'll keep talking forever and ever.
Always. And we were before too.
Yeah, as Lord Buckley says, dig infinity.
Dig infinity indeed. Much love, brother.
All right.